Great, thank you. Welcome. We're very excited to hear from you guys. My name is Darcy Kern. I'm a professor of history at Southern Connecticut State University. I'm also an alumna of the program, so I've been where you are and I understand, but don't be nervous. We're going to have fun.
I'm Rita McCannon, and my voice is not working. I'm Rita McCannon. I'm an attorney in Huntsville, Alabama.
Hi, everyone. I am Tom Vance. I'm a professor of education at Kansas State University. And while I've never been in your chair, I've been in your teacher's chair before, bringing kids to the national finals. So teacher, don't be too nervous. Your students will do great. So look forward to a great conversation.
Could you guys introduce yourselves and your teacher, please?
Good afternoon. My name is Rachel Simmons, and the woman who is most inspirational to me is Jeanette Rankin for defying gender norms and becoming the first woman ever elected to the U.S. House of Representatives.
Hello, my name is Nick Maziotti, and the woman who's most inspirational to me is Katherine Johnson for her contributions to the space race despite being a Black woman at NASA.
Hello, my name is Sam Bailey, and the woman who is most inspirational to me is Greta Thunberg for using her young voice to advocate for climate change.
Hello, my name is Amelia Blakely, and the woman who is most inspirational to me is Susan B. Anthony for her unyielding dedication to expanding the right to vote. And on behalf of Unit 3, our advisor, Gretchen Wolfing, Tahoma High School, and the state of Washington, I thank you for judging us today.
Great, so I will go ahead and read the question and then we will look forward to your prepared response. Question 1. Oliver Wendell Holmes said, "I do not think the United States would come to an end if we lost our power to declare an act of Congress void. I do think the Union would be imperiled if we could not make the declaration as to the laws of the several states. What impact has judicial review had on federalism? Is judicial review a counter-majoritarian practice? Please support your position. What limits, if any, would you place on the practice of judicial review?" You may begin.
It is emphatically the province and duty of the Judicial Department to say what the law is. John Marshall.
Since its establishment in Marbury v. Madison, judicial review has played a pivotal role in federalism by creating a more centralized government.
Judicial review must be used to uphold the Supremacy Clause of Article 6, Clause 3, which states that the Constitution shall be the supreme law of the land and every state shall be bound thereby. This clause has enabled the Supreme Court to assert the enumerated powers of Congress over state laws, as was seen in Gibbons v. Ogden, where a New York law was overturned because it interfered with Congress's ability to regulate interstate commerce.
Moreover, in Martin v. Hunter's Lessee, it was decided that the Supreme Court has full authority to overrule state court rulings, further binding the people of the states to decisions made by judicial review.
However, the 10th Amendment ensures that judicial review does not disregard the power of the states, as seen in National League of Cities v. Ussery, where the Supreme Court ruled that Congress cannot regulate the labor market of state employees.
Justice Rehnquist explained in the majority opinion that this regulation is a power not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, and therefore is reserved to the states.
The Supreme Court eventually overturned this decision in Garcia v. San Antonio Metropolitan Transit Authority, thus reasserting federal authority over the states.
Although federalism allows states to function independently from the national government, judicial review stabilizes the nation by providing a constitutional check on state authority.
Judicial review is a counter-majoritarian practice that is necessary because it protects from majority tyranny within the elected branches.
Through the regulation of legislative and executive power, judicial review ensures that elected officials are not abusing minority groups and properly upholding the Constitution.
Judge John E. Jones III of Pennsylvania interpreted the role of the judiciary described in Article 3 as inherently counter-majoritarian because it provides a check against the unconstitutional abuse and extension of power by the other branches of government.
For example, a majority of states considered abortion to be illegal until Roe v. Wade, where the Supreme Court ruled against public opinion and found that abortion was protected under the fundamental right to privacy.
Similarly, Jim Crow laws were popularized by the South following the creation of the separate but equal doctrine in Plessy v. Ferguson. These laws were found to be a violation of the Equal Protection Clause in Brown v. Board of Education, which set a legal precedent for dismantling popular segregationist policies.
By acting as counter-majoritarian, the judiciary is tasked with defending minority rights from laws that do not pass judicial scrutiny.
No further limit should be placed on judicial review because regulations such as the requirement of a supermajority and elections of justices fail to represent the roots of the court system.
Prior to the Judiciary Act of 1789, the Supreme Court required a 2/3 majority to exercise judicial review, and this policy currently remains in 2 states, North Dakota and Nebraska. Implementing a supermajority would undermine the court's ability to protect the rights of vulnerable groups and individuals, as many crucial decisions have been made by a 5-4 verdict.
For instance, the US Supreme Court upheld the fundamental right to marry for same-sex couples in Obergefell v. Hodges with a 5-4 verdict.
Another proposition is the use of an election process to ensure that judicial review is reflective of the people, thus limiting the power that the executive and legislative branches hold over the judiciary.
Not only would this violate the appointment process laid out in Article 2, Section 2, Clause 2, but the American Constitution Society found in 2013 that campaign finance contributions bear a greater relationship with partisan loyalty.
For example, the study calculated that the likelihood that Republican judges will vote along party lines increases by an average of 3% for every $10,000 contribution made to the campaign.
Though the framers did not incorporate judicial review into the Constitution, it has become one of the most important instruments for checking governmental power and policymaking.
Great timing. So on the issue of campaign finance laws and money influencing politics and the judiciary and all the branches of government, would you propose any change in either the nomination or the confirmation process for judges?
I would argue that the nomination process should remain as it is. A lot of people would propose the fact that by the president being allowed to nominate a Supreme Court judge, they are skewing the Supreme Court into their current political beliefs. But that is not actually always true. You could see that with the appointment of Justice Earl Warren. He was appointed by Eisenhower with the belief that he would mirror Eisenhower's conservative views, but he ended up championing one of the most liberal courts that we've seen.
To disagree with my colleague, I think we should change the appointment process to follow a system like Denmark. We can see that Denmark's Supreme Court is appointed by an independent judiciary committee, as well as Articles 62 and 64 in the Danish Constitution that ensure judicial independence from Parliament.
I would like to respectfully disagree with my colleague Sam. I think that the appointments clause or the appointment process laid out in the appointments clause of Article 2, Section 2, Clause 2, which states that the president shall nominate and the Senate shall confirm, ensures that checks and balances are being followed within our government. And if we were to change the process by which the judicial branch came to be, we would need a constitutional amendment.
I would like to agree with my colleague Sam. Another proposal that should be added is a fixed time for the Senate to evaluate and confirm Supreme Court nominees. So this would prevent the Senate from rushing Supreme Court justices due to political pressures. According to the Congressional Research Service, the median amount of time it takes for the Senate to confirm a justice is 71 days. However, we saw with the confirmation of Amy Coney Barrett in 2020, her confirmation lasted less than 30 days.
Let me ask you that, referring to Amy Coney Barrett, Justice Barrett, I should have said. She was named to replace Justice Ginsburg. Do you see that the replacement of one judge, one justice on the court can change history? And if you do, why? And if you don't, why not? I'm not talking about adding justices now. I'm talking about replacing one for another.
Yes, I could definitely argue that by appointing one justice, it could change the course of history, as mentioned before with Earl Warren, but also with many different justices that we've seen, especially during the attempted passage of the New Deal, where the court packing was brought up in an attempt to pass it, but it was actually the switch of Justice Owen Roberts from more of an independent position to a liberal position that ended up allowing parts of the New Deal to pass, which has changed the course of our history.
I would like to agree with my colleague Rachel. I think that the appointment of one justice can change history, as each justice can have a different constitutional interpretation. Justice Scalia, as many know, is a textualist, which means that he believes that the Constitution should be interpreted directly as the words are written by the original author. And if he was appointed by a justice who believed something different, then that would change the constitutional interpretation of the court rulings.
To agree with my colleagues that appointing or replacing another justice can change the course of history. We can see this with Justice Earl Warren, who completely changed how the court was going with liberally applying the 14th Amendment and increasing defendant representation through Gideon v. Wainwright, and pushing to legalize abortion with his ruling on Griswold v. Connecticut.
Has judicial interpretation of the Constitution increased on the whole? Has it increased or decreased the power of the federal government?
I would argue that the use of judicial review has, in some instances, increased the power of the federal government. You could see that with their striking down of the court case of Dunn v. Blumstein.
Yeah, but overall, has it increased, or, looking at the whole of history? Yeah, there are cases where it goes both ways, but overall, has it increased federal power or decreased it?
I would say increased. It has increased federal power.
I would like to agree with my colleague and say that it has increased federal power significantly, because that judicial review significantly puts the federal courts above the state courts.
So what are the vehicles by which the court has used to increase federal power? What are the constitutional vehicles?
So the Supremacy Clause of Article 6, Clause 2 states that federal laws are the supreme law of the land, and this does follow that decisions made by the court are the supreme law of the land, and they reside over state court rulings. We can see this in Arizona v. Intertribal Council of Arizona, in which the federal government determined that the state of Arizona could use voter IDs in their local and state elections. However, they could not use them in federal elections because it disenfranchised a large portion of the population.
Another constitutional vehicle for expanding federal power has been the 14th Amendment and the Due Process Clause located in Section 1 of the 14th Amendment.
I'm going to interrupt you there, Nick. I got it. You can name those. I got it. You convinced me. But now here's the payoff question. When the court, whether using the 14th Amendment or the Commerce Clause or the Necessary and Proper Clause or whatever, when the court's confronted with an issue of either increasing the power of the national government or having states retain their power or increasing the power of states, what principles should guide those interpretations? If you could suggest principles, big ideas to the Supreme Court to guide their interpretations involving federalism, what would you suggest?
I would suggest that the Supreme Court follow the 10th Amendment and the different types of federalism that we have seen. There is layered cake federalism and marble federalism, and I think that the Supreme Court should not use layered cake federalism, meaning that there are not things that are strictly delegated to either the federal government or the state governments, but I would suggest that they follow marbled federalism, which means that the Supreme Court and the states need to work together on multiple issues. We can see this with marijuana in the states. At the federal level, marijuana is illegal. However, the states are given police powers by the 10th Amendment, which means that they are the ones in charge of convicting said users of marijuana. And so if at the state level it is legal, then at the federal level, it can still remain illegal.
Thank you.
You mentioned, sort of on this same question, you mentioned earlier that Scalia is a textualist. I'm wondering how theories of constitutional interpretation influence judicial review.
I think that they do influence judicial review to a point, because the way that you look at the Constitution and the way that you read it, whether you're reading it as a living, breathing document or you're reading it as the exact way it's written when it was written versus today, I would argue that that does have an impact on how you interpret the Constitution. A lot of people right now are speculating about Amy Coney Barrett's interpretation of the Constitution based on who she was, who she worked with or was trained by. But it's their rulings that really shows how they view that.
And the philosophy of modernism was absolutely influenced judicial review in the case of Plessy v. Ferguson, because the Supreme Court used modernism to validate the separate but equal doctrine. However, the rationalist approach, which is what I support, the rationalists actually believe that the 14th Amendment forbade racial segregation upon its time of ratification.
Let's go back to the history of judicial review. Do you think that national judicial review, in other words, being able to strike down a law of Congress or an act of the president, co-equal branch, was intended by the founders? And if so, what evidence can you cite that it was?
I would argue that yes, it was intended by the founders in order to provide a check on the other branches. You could see that with Hamilton in Federalist 78, in which he argued that judicial review was necessary because the judicial branch had no control over either the sword nor the purse.
Any other precedents, any other precursors to national judicial review?
Saved by the sign.
Exactly what I was thinking.
Saved by the sign. Look, I thought you guys did a very good job. You actually raised some points that we haven't heard today, and I think that would be worth talking about more. I thought you did a great job talking about how Warren did not follow Eisenhower. You mentioned Denmark as a possible example. I do think you could have mentioned more about textualism and originalism, which are not necessarily the same thing. But you talked about states being given the police powers by the 10th Amendment, which was something we haven't heard much of today. And I think it's an important point. And you also mentioned the Intertribal Council, which I think, thinking about the relationship of the Supreme Court to Native American councils and governments, is something worth exploring further. And it's something we haven't heard today. So very good job. Very good job. You should be proud of yourselves.
I agree. I was very interested in the Intertribal Council case. I was also anxious to delve farther into the states having the policing powers, but the climate, the societal climate we have with our race issue right now in this country. And if the states have the policing powers, are they also going to take common sense approaches to training and all those kinds of things? Or is the federal government going to find itself getting involved? And I wondered, I couldn't help but wonder about that, but we didn't have, the lady with the sign and all that, holding it up, we didn't get to ask everything. But I thought you did a grand job, and you disagreed gracefully and discussed your various opinions in a very polite manner, and I appreciated it very much.
Yeah, I concur with those ideas. And, obviously, come on, you guys really know a lot. I mean, that it's clear that you've done your homework, and the level of detail and specificity is absolutely impressive. However, there is, in addition to having that level of specificity and detail, which is always important, it's also important to be able to kind of step back from all of those details and to make some decisions about how you feel as a citizen about about these details, and to be able to draw principles and abstractions from all of the things that you're learning about in We the People. So that was really what I was pushing you for, and you were able to come up with some examples. When we expand the federal government's power, maybe we should look to the Constitution, to the words of the Constitution, which is a good thing. But there are other things that you might have mentioned as well. And you did mention the 10th Amendment, which, by the way, we haven't heard very much. But there are other things, and I'll leave it at, you might want to look at, for one court's version of what we should really pay close attention to, famous footnote number 4 in Caroline Products, political processes, and the rights of discrete and insular minorities, and so on. So anyway, I just got time carded. So even though we're on our last one,
Time is up.
so excellent job.
Cut it.
All right, we will save that for the Tuesday commentary.